So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about a perfumer who is just as comfortable making a fragrance for £20 as he is making a fragrance to be sold for several £100s. He's someone who's won award after award for his fragrances and someone who's been the twice recipient of the Perfume Extraordinaire Award. He's also created entire ranges of fragrances for particular brands, for example, Byredo, Floral Street and Victoria Beckham. And in total, he's formulated over 400 fragrances in the last 20 years. So today's video is all about Jerome Epinette. So you may have already seen my series looking at the lives of different perfumers. So I started off with Quentin Biche, I've moved on to Dominique Robuchon, and I've also profiled Francis Kurkdjian. So if you are interested in those perfumers and you want to go check out this video series, I'll leave a link down below in the description box. If you haven't seen me before, I'm Claire. I make videos all about fragrance. I talk about perfume science, perfume history, perfume psychology. I also just do some straight perfume reviews, fun perfume tags, and also this perfumer profile series. So if that kind of thing interests you and you haven't already subscribed, then please do consider subscribing. And please also press the like button if you do enjoy this kind of content. So I remember when I first started getting into fragrance, I became obsessed with trying to find the best smelling, least expensive fragrance. And the one perfumer whose name kept coming up again and again in all of the fragrances that I seemed to hit upon and love was Jerome Epinette. And that's really why I'm making this profile. So yeah, let's get on with this. Where did Jerome Epinette grow up? So Jerome Epinette was born in 1975 and he grew up in the Burgundy region of France. And his mum owned 2 perfume stores, so he really credits her with introducing him into the world of fragrance and giving him an early passion for fragrance. He says he remembers that she would always be wearing things like Dior's Poison or Guerlain's Shalimar, really standout examples of classic French perfumery. And he says that one day he came across a fragrance that just didn't fit the mould of what he'd previously been smelling. And that fragrance was Beverly Hills. So that fragrance, he says, to him smelt of sunshine. It was something that was incredibly different. It was bold, it was colourful, it was fruity, it was vibrant. And it made him think again about what perfumery was. He says he was also struck by the packaging that the fragrance came in. So Beverly Hills comes in yellow striped packaging. It actually makes me think a little bit of the awnings, the sun awnings that you get on houses in Beverly Hills. I guess that's maybe what they were going for. But yeah, that fragrance was the one that he says really stood out to him the first time he tried it. So as a teenager, Jerome would work in his mum's shop, but he would also do his homework in the back of the shop as well. And he says that he would watch his mum selling fragrances to people and try and work out how she was doing that. He realised that to sell people fragrances, you had to tell them a story. You had to show that that fragrance was a story in a bottle. And that was something that really struck him very early on in his interactions with fragrance and how fragrance sales work. Working in the shop made him realise the questions you had to ask to get to the fragrance that the person wanted to buy to make a sale. And he says that this skill has stood him in good stead for making fragrances for brands as a perfumer later on in life. At this time, when he was working in the shop, he would be wearing popular fragrances at the time, so things like Jean-Paul Gaultier's Le Mal, perhaps Chanel's Platinum Egoist, and also Acqua di Gio by Armani. With working in the shop, Jerome quickly realised that perfumery was where his passion lay, and he says that if he hadn't become a perfumer, he would have become a wine expert or someone involved in the cookery industry, because he is someone who absolutely loves tastes, flavours and smells. So as is customary for people entering the perfumery industry, Jerome had to get a science degree first before he could be accepted into perfumery school. So he went and did a master's in biochemistry at Dijon University, and then he went on to a perfumery school in Grasse. So he says that being in Grasse allowed him to become familiar with how synthetics are produced. It really gave him opportunities to visit fields, to see harvests, and to learn all about the industry as a whole. After perfumery school, Jerome Epinette joined Robertet, who he still works for to this day, and he joined them in 2003, aged 28. And it was under Michel Amarac's tutelage that he produced his first fragrance for Mont Blanc, and it was called Femme Individuelle, and it was the EDT. So that fragrance is described as a gourmand chypre fragrance, so nicely straddling the old and the new there. But it's also a fragrance with some really standout notes. So it has bay leaf, red currant, and also pink pepper. But really, overall, it's a rose fragrance. In 2006, aged 31, Jerome Epinette moved from Paris to New York to join the New York offices of Robertet. This move would be absolutely instrumental to the rest of his career. It really meant that he was in a place where he could best help and interact with a number of different brands who were looking to launch a new range of fragrances. And in this way, he got to be involved in the launch of several brand new niche brands. Jerome Epinette's real trademark style with how he works with brands is that he often makes fragrances repeatedly from the same brand. And the first brand that he did that for was Byredo. So Byredo originally launched in 2006, and they originally made candles, and Barney's, the department store that sold their candles in New York, really just said to the brand that actually they launched fragrances they could do incredibly well. So Byredo went off to talk to Robertet, and Robertet sent Jerome Epinette to talk to the brand owner. And Jerome Epinette produced a set of fragrances. I think they initially launched with 5 or 6 fragrances, and by 2008 they were on the market. And the standout offering from Jerome's original launch fragrances was Gypsy Water. So Gypsy Water is a citrusy, sweet, sandalwood and vanilla fragrance, and it really has Jerome Epinette's signature style stamped all over it. So Jerome is known for his love of short and simple formulations, and he's also someone who really likes lighter woods. So he's someone who loves sandalwood, who likes perhaps even light cedars, and maybe even woody style grasses such as vetiver. So he has that in this fragrance, but also he really likes light and airy citruses, and Gypsy Water has both of those things. Epinette's style is really well exemplified by his other work for Byredo. Epinette likes clean, simple, he likes good quality ingredients, and he also likes really colourful compositions. Essentially, Byredo's style really suits Jerome's style, or perhaps Jerome's style influenced Byredo's style. Only a year later, in 2009, Byredo released Bal d'Afrique, which was also by Jerome Epinette, and that was another huge hit. Bal d'Afrique is a soft, citrusy vetiver fragrance, but with fruity, floral and green touches to it. And this again shows Epinette's love of simplicity and also colour. When Jerome was interviewed about his work style, he said that really the thing that stands out for him when he's working with a niche brand versus a designer brand is that there's fewer restrictions, and that's why he quite often works with niche brands rather than designer brands. And you will notice this in this video. Jerome is someone who really hasn't released a lot of designer fragrances. It's really been mainly small brand niche or new brand niche. And I think that really reflects his love of the freedom that those brands give him. Jerome also says that he likes to work without consumer testing, because he says consumer testing is used as too much of a blunt instrument in the fragrance industry. So quite often when a designer fragrance brand wants to launch a fragrance, they will do very extensive consumer testing because they need it to appeal to a lot of people. And Jerome says that's harmful to creativity because it makes you pigeonhole fragrances to be mass appealing and crowd pleasing. And sometimes he says some of the best fragrances are only appealing to a very select group of people. And that's fine, that's something that can be done when you're in the niche world, but it's not necessarily something you can do when you're in the world of designers. It's really notable to me just how many brands Jerome Epinette has helped to launch and has been involved with making repeatedly fragrances for. It suggests to me that his work is very successful and sells very well. So we've already heard about his work for Byredo, but he was also launching brands like Vilhelm Parfumerie, Floral Street, Ellis Brooklyn, Sol de Janeiro and Victoria Beckham. But going further back, it was Atelier Cologne. So by 2010, Jerome Epinette was working with Atelier Cologne, and he was really providing the counterpoint to their more airy citrus kind of fragrances. So his standout creations for them are things like Rose Anonyme, Santal Carmin, and also Café Tuberosa, which actually ended up winning him his first Perfume Extraordinaire Award in 2018. So Café Tuberosa was lauded because it's such a mysterious, dark and brooding kind of fragrance. It's really a kind of mocha fragrance with a dark rose and a hint of tuberose. Sadly discontinued now though. By 2015, Jerome was working with brands like Vilhelm Parfumerie, and he was designing and helping to launch an initial collection of fragrances for them. The standout of the original collection was one that he formulated called Dear Polly. So Dear Polly was actually designed to reflect the relationship of the brand owner with his partner, and it was really designed as a fragrance that they could both wear when they were away from each other. So it's based around the note of black tea, and that's because Polly loved tea. She would always be drinking tea, and so that made the brand owner think of tea. But yeah, it's a smoky and slightly mysterious tea fragrance, and I think that was the best seller from the range for quite some time. So in 2017, Jerome Epinette ended up working with Floral Street, and Floral Street were launching as a new brand, and they wanted an entire range of fragrances, formulating. So Jerome actually produced 8 of their fragrances, and I think he continues to produce most of their fragrances, if not all their fragrances today. And I remember Floral Street were one of the first niche brands that I ever tried. I remember getting their sample set and falling totally in love with quite a few of their fragrances. And really, Floral Street were a brand that were very reasonably priced at the time for the quality of their fragrances. And they also had this idea of a continuum of light to dark. They were one of the first brands I heard talking about being cruelty-free and also vegan. And I think their fragrances really do stand out. They are something very distinctive. So the one that I love, and the one that I ended up picking from the original collection, was Ylang Ylang Espresso. So this is really an espresso kind of fragrance. It's a dark coffee fragrance in the opening, but it turns into a rose syrup as it dries down, and it does have a little slight twang of ylang ylang about it as well. Dark, mysterious, and also with patchouli, which is another fragrance note that Jerome Epinette absolutely loves, and this one as well is widely compared with Café Tuberosa from Atelier Cologne. So if you are missing Café Tuberosa and you want to find something similar, you might want to check out this one. So in parallel to his work with Floral Street, Jerome Epinette was also producing fragrances for Nest around this time. And actually he has over 20 fragrances, I think, with Nest now. Nest, much like Byredo, were originally producing candles. And actually Jerome clearly has a passion for home fragrance as well, because he said in an interview when he was asked about how his home smells, he said that his home is full of candles. It smells of candles. So clearly that was something that he was heavily involved with as well for the brand. And actually I think he has now created home sprays, home fragrances. So for Nest, it was all about the vision of the brand owner, and also she would produce these kind of paintings of flowers on black backgrounds, which they ended up using for the bottles of the fragrances. And Jerome Epinette says that he used these paintings as inspiration for each of the fragrances. Nest is also a brand that liked to highlight one particular note or one particular idea in fragrances, and I think that really works with Jerome Epinette's style of fragrance making, and I think that's probably why Nest has been so successful with Jerome on board. So Jerome Epinette has made fragrances for many brands, as you might imagine, with his 400 odd fragrance back catalogue. So I'll just mention these other ones briefly. So he's worked with Kierin, NYC, Phlur. I think he made Tangerine Boy for Phlur, for example. And also he was involved with the relaunch of Commodities fragrances, which I think was pretty successful. And he's also created an entire range of fragrances for Noyz. So when you think about Jerome Epinette, you might think, that's all very well, but all I've been hearing are niche brands so far. But actually, Jerome has been involved with making fragrances really across the spectrum. So if you can't afford a £200 fragrance or even a £100 fragrance, you can definitely find something in Jerome's back catalogue to go and try. So For example, he's very famous for his work with Zara. And I think his most famous creation for Zara, the one that really put him on the map, was Vibrant Leather. So Vibrant Leather was basically duping Creed's Aventus. And I think that's why it was probably a bestseller. But yeah, his other work for Zara, he's probably formulated over 50, maybe even nearly 100 fragrances for Zara. He's done a lot of work with that brand. So those fragrances definitely are ones to check out that are very affordable. Also, if you are looking for an affordable Jerome Epinette fragrance, you could go to brands such as And Other Stories. So I think he's formulated probably most of And Other Stories fragrances, if not all of them. And I actually own one of them. I own Sardonyx Fire. So this fragrance is often compared to one of his fragrances for Byredo, which is called Black Saffron. And yeah, this is a saffron rose amber fragrance. Very deep and booming, this one. So that's Sardonyx Fire by And Other Stories. Jerome has also created fragrances for celebrity brands. So he made a fragrance for Christina Aguilera, and he also has formulated several of Ariana Grande's fragrances, including Thank You Next, Mod Vanilla, and also God Is a Woman. So God Is a Woman has been compared to Ellis Brooklyn's Sweet, which he also formulated, and actually he also made quite a lot of fragrances for Ellis Brooklyn. So thinking about all the fragrances that Jerome has been involved in formulating and thinking about commercial success, ironically, one of his biggest successes was a body spray. And actually, this fragrance he originally formulated for a body cream. So the Boom Boom cream from Sol de Janeiro, he was actually the guy who formulated the scent of that. So the perfume market during the late 2010s was beginning to fracture into two. And really the middle ground of the perfume market was becoming more polarised. You were either a very expensive niche brand or you were a cheaper brand. And we had the rise of the affordable Middle Eastern fragrances at this time point. But we also had a rise in popularity of body sprays and also a rise in the popularity of celebrity fragrances in the late 2010s. So Sol de Janeiro really wanted a gourmand fragrance that still felt luxurious. They didn't want something that was sticky or sickly. They wanted something that just felt comforting. And that really fitted with the feelings that we all had around the time of the pandemic. Sol de Janeiro really were a moment, I think, when they happened on the market at the right time. So in 2015, Jerome created the original Cheeriosa fragrance 62, and that really hinged around a caramel of vanilla and pistachio. In 2017, he translated this into a body spray and then later on a fragrance. Ironically, the perfume never did as well as the body spray. The body spray was super affordable, although quite expensive for a body spray. It still was at a price point that I think appealed to a lot of people. And it's something that really did last a long time as well. So people didn't really see the need for a perfume at a higher price point. And I think that was probably why the perfume didn't do as well as the body spray. The product was an enormous hit, and really having the accompanying products around the body spray took this fragrance into new markets. That fragrance really tried to capture the idea of Brazil in a bottle. And at the time, the Rio Olympics in 2016 were fresh in people's minds. The fragrance really reminded people of the country's style and sense of fun. And I think that's why it was just such a global hit. It was a bestseller in the UK and also in the US and in many other countries around the world. So finally, more recently, one of his biggest brand launches has been Victoria Beckham's fragrance line. And Victoria Beckham actually says that she stalked him. That's the word she used. She stalked him because she found out that a lot of her favourite fragrances were actually Jerome's creations. So very famously, Victoria Beckham is associated with Vilhelm Parfumerie's room service, and that is something that Jerome had formulated. So I think that's why she sought him out. But he was in talks with Victoria Beckham for over 8 years, designing her original launch collection of 3 fragrances. And that line was really based around her own memories of parts of her life in kind of vignettes in fragrances. And I feel like that line has done quite well for Victoria Beckham, and she's ended up launching a 4th fragrance with Jerome Epinette. So how does Jerome work? He says he's a minimalist. He says he works in a very white feeling office that's very clean and tidy. and he's not someone who can deal with clutter. He likes to smell things really early in the morning that he's made and left the night before, so he can smell the dry downs of things and check out the longevity. And yeah, he just seems like he's a very kind of organised and driven kind of person, I guess. When asked whether Jerome has a signature fragrance, he says that he's created his own fragrance and he wears that one. So actually that is a sparkling citrus musk, and he says he chose that because he feels like citrus makes him happy, but also it's a lighter style fragrance that won't interfere with him smelling what he's been creating that day. And actually when he was asked, he said that he wouldn't market it because it's his and he doesn't want everybody else smelling of it, which, you know, I guess is the perfumer's prerogative, isn't it? So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have enjoyed it, then please do press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. Which Jerome Epinette fragrances do you have in your own collections and do you love? I haven't discussed Tiffany's Rose Gold, but that's another fragrance that he did actually formulate. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on Jerome Epinette and really your thoughts on Zara and other Stories fragrances. Have you tried any of his creations for those brands? I'd be really interested to know. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.